So it's 1940, the whole world is caught up in the Second World War. But way out on the island of Newfoundland, a totally different kind of struggle was taking place. This one wasn't about tanks or planes, it was about community, about self-reliance. And the whole story is captured in, of all things, this old kind of dry-looking government report that, believe me, is anything but. Let's dig in.
Okay, so this is it, the first annual report of cooperative societies in Newfoundland. And behind this really simple blue cover is just this fascinating story of how regular people, fishermen, farmers, everyday workers, decided to come together to build a future for themselves, right in the middle of all that global chaos. And this one sentence, right from the report, just gets to the absolute heart of the matter. The author, a guy named DJ Masichern, he wasn't just counting beans here. He was laying out a whole philosophy. See, the goal wasn't just to make profitable little shops. It was to build stronger, more capable, more democratic communities. This was a social movement first and a business second. So how did this big idea of building a people actually start to take shape? Well, it all kicked off with a new law. One that wasn't just about rules and regulations, but was really designed to empower people from the ground up. This act, passed in 1939, was basically the official starting gun. When registration opened up in January 1940, it gave communities all across Newfoundland a legal toolkit to build their own economic destiny, to organize, to save, and to work together. But, just having a law on the books is one thing. They immediately ran into a battle for public opinion. Right, so like any new idea, these co-ops were dealing with a lot of skepticism and just plain wrong information. And the author of this report, he knew he had to tackle these myths head on. Masichern basically used this first ever report as his platform to just set the record straight. He knew that for this whole thing to work, people had to understand what it really was. And maybe even more importantly, what it wasn't. So, what was the biggest myth? That this was all just another government handout. Masichern is so clear in the report. The money, the capital for these co-ops came directly from the savings of the members themselves. This was a pure grassroots movement, funded by the very people it was designed to serve. And that leads right to the second myth, that if a co-op went under, well, the government would just step in and bail them out. Nope, not a chance. The report really hammers home that a fundamental principle was that the movement should be free of governmental assistance. These societies were on their own, responsible for their own books, and most of them had to operate on a cash-only basis to make sure they didn't get into debt. They were building this thing on their own 2 feet. All right, so with that fierce independence came some real accountability. And when we get to the numbers section, the report is, well, it's refreshingly and kind of shockingly honest about the challenges they were up against. I mean, can you imagine reading that in an official report today? Here are the numbers, but we can't really say they're accurate. But this wasn't a sign of failure at all. It was actually a sign of how real and grassroots this whole thing was. They were literally figuring it out as they went along. And here's why the numbers were a bit shaky. I mean, think about it. There was no QuickBooks back then. There was no standard system at all. The folks running these places were local leaders, not trained accountants. And on top of all that, because of the war, the few government staff who could have helped were being laid off. These were the real-world problems they were dealing with every single day. But here's the kicker. Even with all the messy bookkeeping and the chaotic numbers, the trend was crystal clear. The movement wasn't just getting by, it was absolutely exploding. Just look at this. In a single year, membership jumped by almost 1,000 people. The share capital, and remember, that's the members' own money they're putting in, it more than tripled. Sales shot up by over $100,000. In 1940, that is a staggering amount of money. This wasn't just some nice idea, it was actually working. So they've got this incredible momentum. But the leaders, they were smart. They knew passion and growth could only get you so far. To make this thing last, they needed a rock-solid structure. And the report lays out this remarkably ambitious blueprint for what had to happen next. Yeah, they looked at their weaknesses, the lack of training, the shaky financial systems, and they started building the institutions they needed to fix them. This was all about turning a bunch of small, separate co-ops into a powerful, connected network. And their plan for the next year, for 1941, was brilliant. They were going to set up regional councils to get everyone on the same page. They wanted to create a central credit society, basically a bank for the co-ops, and even their own insurance society. And to fix that messy accounting problem,
They were going to launch a bookkeeping course through the mail. This was strategic, it was smart, and it was so forward-thinking. And this insurance idea, it was genius because it was built for real working people. If you had a loan and you died, it was paid off, so your family wasn't stuck with the debt. Your savings were insured, so they kind of doubled as a life insurance policy. It all goes right back to that main idea. This was about building a people, protecting families, and giving them a kind of security they just couldn't get anywhere else. So all of this, the planning, the saving, the building, it wasn't just about making better businesses. You have to remember, this was all happening while the world was at war. And that context, it's the key to understanding what this movement was really all about.
The report's author knew the war wouldn't last forever, and that when it ended, massive social and economic shocks were going to follow. The whole co-op movement was seen as a training ground. It was teaching people how to save, how to organize democratically, so they'd be ready to stand these shocks. It was like they were building an ark before the flood.
And this brings us to the final, really powerful line from the main part of the report. The idea was that by building these strong communities at home, Newfoundland could make its own unique contribution to the new order of things. This little local movement had a truly global vision. The whole story really leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? Back in 1940, in Newfoundland, the answer to crisis was cooperation, self-reliance, and a focus on building up people, not just profits. It really makes you wonder, what are the answers for the challenges we're facing today?